It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted to have you joining us. You know what? We recently started our brand new show, The Bible's Greatest Mysteries. You've probably been watching it for the last couple of weeks. Boy, I'll tell you what, we got some great guests lined up for that.
We do. Oh, we've got some fascinating topics to discuss, and I overuse that word fascinating, I've noticed. When I watch back editing the video, I realize how often I use that word, but there aren't many other words that, intriguing, compelling, exciting.
Know. We need a thesaurus.
Lots of wonderful adjectives to apply to the guests who are coming. Aaron Lipkin, who coordinates our Israel tours, but who's also a huge supporter of archaeology in the Holy Land and has made friends with a number of the archaeologists working on some very important dig sites, including Joshua's altar in Shiloh.
And also archaeologists that have connections directly with the topic for today's program. We started it last week, but we're going to continue it this week because it's too big.
Yes.
Too big a topic just to, spend 25 minutes on.
Well, true. And we had promised to connect it to end times prophecy last week, and I'd mentioned Ezekiel 38 and 39, right, which is the whole point, and we didn't quite get to that. But what really struck us as we started talking about this and discussing it before last week's
this being
program,
Sodom.
This being the city of Sodom, right, the topic of the destruction of Sodom, was how it connects to end times prophecy, but also in ways that weren't really obvious at first. Clearly, because of the work that we've done for the research for the book Veneration, where we connected it to Ezekiel 38 and 39 and the war of Gog and Magog, that is fairly obvious, but it had not connected in my mind that the visit during which God promised Abraham and Sarah a son was connected to the visit to Sodom.
Yes, it was a poke in the eye in a number of ways that we're going to discuss here in a minute. But before we get to that, I want to really quickly say thank you to Maria from Sweden. I just got your letter, Maria, and I read it last night. I was so touched by it. Thank you for writing. I don't know how long it took, but it certainly flew here very quickly, I imagine. And I was delighted to read your story, to read about your dream, and that you enjoy the Red Wing Saga. So thank you very much, and all of the other books we've written. Thank you for reading that, and for everyone who has been digging into the books that Derek and I write together, the ones he writes by himself. He's got a brand new one coming out. In fact, it may be out by now.
Well, no, this one is going to be...
it's middle of November.
Middle of November is the official launch date. So it should be soon, but you'll be seeing programs about that on Skywatch TV, the main program. And, of course, we'll talk about that as the research relates to what we discuss here, of course, on Unraveling Revelation.
It does, and, of course, I've been plotting out Book 8 for, I hope, a late December release this year. So just jumping right in now that we've done that, and thank you again very much to everyone. And you've also written to us saying how much you appreciate this topic, digging into why Sodom happened.
Exactly. The city of Sodom and Gomorrah, were clearly very important in the Old Testament. And we see this if we back up to Genesis chapter 14 in the War of 9 Kings, which we've talked about previously. This, of course, was the war where Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, led a coalition of kings from Mesopotamia to cross. Well, they went around the Syrian desert because trying to cross the Syrian desert directly was, still is today, a really dumb idea.
It really is.
Especially when you were walking.
Well, especially now because the Syrian desert gets into some dangerous areas. But yeah, walking, no.
But spiritually speaking, the Syrian desert has always been really dicey.
That's the point.
The Euphrates River cuts right through it, and that was the that was one of the strongholds of the god worshipped by the Amorites called Dagon, later adopted by the Philistines.
In fact, there are 4 angels bound in that river.
Right.
That make it also dangerous.
Exactly. So setting aside that rabbit trail, because that could take an entire program, the cities had to be important enough to march an army for months.
There has to be a big payoff to do it.
There would have to be a reason. They wouldn't just do this just on a whim. So the scholars who've been digging at this site called Tal el-Hammam have found a city that was one of the largest in the southern Levant. In fact, it was the largest continuously occupied city because it was continuously occupied until the time it was destroyed. And by that point, it had been occupied for about 2,500 years. I mean, think about that. The number of years between Nebuchadnezzar destroying the temple in Jerusalem and you watching this video is how long that city was in existence. And it was 5 times larger than Jerusalem, 10 times larger than Jericho at the time it was destroyed.
Wow. Now, before we go on, we have to find out why.
Right.
Why that site was considered so sacred.
And that's the key. That's the key. And we can only really speculate on this. God now used the kings of the East because it's mentioned in Scripture, so it must be important. There are no unimportant details. When you read Genesis 14, you see that Kedorlaomer and his coalition did battle against Rephaim tribes east of the Jordan River in places that are significant. One is called Ashtaroth Karnaim, which is later described as one of the capitals of Og of Bashan. And that would be at least 2 centuries later, maybe 4 centuries later, depending on how your timeline is put together. But they destroyed the Rephaim tribes and pushed them out of there so that by the time Moses and the Israelites arrived, Og was called the last of the remnant of the Rephaim, the living Rephaim. So that was significant. And then when you plot out the course of these armies on a map, it looks like they did a circuit around the Dead Sea and then did battle again at the north end of the Dead Sea before heading off with all of their loot.
So this is like a big necropolis area for the fallen realm, the demons.
Yes, that's exactly right, because that area east of the Dead Sea, east of the Dead Sea up to Mount Hermon on the east side of the Jordan River, as we've discussed before, is the area of the highest concentration of dolmens, which are these funerary monuments connected, I think, to the Rephaim. Now,
I think too.
There's no writing inside. They found a few that have some markings and some artwork on the inside, but no inscriptions that tell us specifically who built this and why they built it and to whom it's dedicated or anything like that. Nothing like that. But Dr. Stephen Collins, who led the dig, is still leading the excavations at Tal el-Hammam, Sodom. We had the opportunity to talk with him at the International Symposium on Archaeology and the Bible, and we asked him about dolmens because he mentions them in his book, Finding Sodom. He's fascinated by them as well, and he believes that these were used as places to honor the dead, the veneration of the dead.
I've been saying that.
Right.
I so agree with him on that. And I think the reason they are places for honoring the dead, again, this is speculation because there's no smoking gun, if you want to put it that way. They're built like doorways for a reason. In other words, this is a place where you go to ask the dead to help you with a problem or ask them to come and commune with you.
Right.
They're worshipped as ancestors, but these are demons.
Yeah, and as we learned in our research for veneration, in ancient Mesopotamia, not just in that Jordan River area, but all of ancient Mesopotamia, the dead were never really gone. They were part of everyday life.
So Sodom, smack dab in the middle of this big necropolis, worshiping an entity known as the Lord of the Opening.
Right. That was the other thing that we found really interesting, that when we tried to figure out who this Baal Peor was, or Baal Peor, and
Lord of the Opening.
Right. Because the Peor comes from a Hebrew word that means opening or gap or cleft or
like
whatever.
Gate.
A gate. Yeah. A Lord of the gates of hell. And that was serious enough for God to punish Moses and the Israelites by destroying 24,000 with a plague before Phinehas got, put a stop to it with his spear.
Well, exactly. Well, I think I've speculated regarding this on this program before. I may have said it last week, so forgive me if I'm repeating. But if Sodom were involved in activities that was trying to bring back this entity, the way the people of Babel were trying to bring back the golden age.
Yes. summoning that there was something connected to this area that had to do with a god believed to be very powerful, and we're talking small g god now, fallen angel, who was believed to be very powerful, who had to be summoned from the netherworld, hence Baal Peor, Lord of the opening to the netherworld. This, I think, connects to the term that Ezekiel used for participants in the war of Gog and Magog. And this is where we get into the connection to end times prophecy.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So there's something about this area. And you mentioned this as we were discussing this for a program that we've recorded for the Bible's Greatest Mysteries coming up in several weeks, that in Genesis chapter 50, when Jacob dies, so now a couple hundred years after Abraham and Lot and the destruction of Sodom, which the archaeologists who have been doing the excavating, they put that at about 1650 BC. And we understand that doesn't track with most of our timelines if we are using the Archbishop Usher method of adding up the ages of the patriarchs. We get that. But still, several hundred years later, when Moses and the Israelites arrive, they find this ruined city, and they begin worshiping this Lord of the Gap, the Lord of the Opening, whatever. But in between there, Jacob, who has followed Joseph to Egypt, dies. Joseph makes good on his promise to take him back to be buried in his homeland at the tomb, the cave that Abraham had purchased from
Cave of the Patriarchs.
Right, at Hebron. So, for some reason, in Genesis 50, we read that he followed a path that took him east of the Dead Sea.
He didn't go directly there.
He did not. And that is really curious, and we need to ask the question, why? What was so significant about that location? We find that they went to a place called the threshing floor of Atad, A-T-A-D, which is beyond the Jordan. Now, you wouldn't go that way.
It's a threshing floor.
Which is a portal.
A big, big deal. Well, we're going to let you just think about that for a few minutes because we're going to take a break and come back and discuss why threshing floor is a big deal.
And we'll connect it to the war of Gog and Magog. That's next on Unraveling Revelation.
Call now and take advantage of Skywatch TV's most groundbreaking deal of the year. With the rediscovery of the ancient prophecies from a mysterious group of prophets and scribes hundreds of years before Christ, your understanding of end times prophecy and the final age of man is about to be forever changed. In Josh Peck's new book, The Lost Prophecies of Qumran, the veil is lifted as you discover how much of what you've been taught about Israel in the first century is incomplete. Shockingly, there were Jewish believers who knew exactly what to expect from the coming Messiah, that he would be God in the flesh, would die for our sins, and even the date of his first arrival. In Josh Peck's new book, The Lost Prophecies of Qumran, you will discover lost prophecies only recently discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls about the time we are now living in, how the enigmatic group known as the Essenes formed and what influence they had on the New Testament, what hidden feasts and festivals the Essenes celebrated, and what messages the group left behind for believers living in the present age, how the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation fit within the Essene timetable, and how an ancient Jewish calendar actually predicts the prophetic significance of the year 2025. But that's not all. For the first time ever, you'll also receive Dr. Ken Johnson's massive 3-book collection entitled The Ancient Mysteries of the Essenes, where Dr. Johnson compiles 3 of his most groundbreaking research studies on the Dead Sea Scrolls into one massive collection. In Book 1, The Ancient Dead Sea Scrolls Calendar and the Prophecies It Reveals, you will discover the secrets of the mysterious 364-day calendar used by the ancients since the time of creation, and how it has been hidden until now for the appointed time. In Book 2, Ancient Testimonies of the Patriarchs, Autobiographies from the Dead Sea Scrolls, you will hear the previously hidden prophetic texts of such patriarchs as Enos, grandson of Adam, Lamech, father of Noah, Amram, father of Moses and Aaron, and even Enoch from the Book of Enoch fame. And in the most shocking revelation yet, Book 3, The Ancient Order of Melchizedek, you will learn astonishing facts about the enigmatic priest Melchizedek, such as why his priesthood was and is different from that of Levi, why the Messiah was ordained after the order of Melchizedek, and how the facts surrounding this mysterious order dramatically affect the theology and practical applications of our Christian walk today. This collection is an absolute necessity for any researcher's library, and for those who want to fully step into the minds of the ancients and see the Dead Sea Scrolls like they never have before. Now you can get this incredible collection for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. So don't miss out on Skywatch TV's most groundbreaking deal of the year, the Lost Prophecies and Ancient Mysteries collection. Available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
Here are the upcoming conferences and events featuring the team from Skywatch TV. For a full list and complete information, log on to skywatchtv.com/events or download our free mobile app for iOS and Android devices and Amazon Kindle Fire tablets. We have links to the app stores posted at skywatchtv.com.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and if you want to see Tal el-Hammam, the very place we're talking about that is probably ancient Sodom, you can go with us to Israel. Take the Jordan extension, and we will stand on Mount Nebo just as Moses and the Israelites did, and we will look out over the plains, and you will see Jericho and Sodom.
Mm-hmm. It's very easy to see from Mount Nebo as you're looking across the Jordan River at Jericho. The Dead Sea is very obvious off to the left, and there's a location at about 2 o'clock as you're facing Jericho, that little hill extending into the very fertile lowland there, the valley along the Jordan, and that was the site of ancient Sodom. If these researchers from Trinity Southwest University are correct, and we think they are.
Well, it's called the Ruins of the Travelers.
Yes.
And Moses climbed the mountain of the travelers as he overlooked that area. So you can do it too. Just go to skywatchingisrael.com and you can read all about it.
Yes. So why did Joseph take Jacob there? This threshing floor of a Tad.
Threshing floor.
Yeah, and again, you make this excellent point that, and you wrote about this. That was one of the chapters you could
in Giants, Gods,
in Veneration.
Yeah.
Where the threshing floor.
We've written so many things
I know, we're getting to a point where we can't remember what we've written. But the threshing floor of Arana in Jerusalem was and is the site of the Temple Mount.
Well, I started there because there's it's one of the
Rephaim texts from Ugarit,
where the threshing floor of El plays a big part in supposedly revivifying the very demons in that necropolis area.
Yes, these Rephaim who were believed to arrive at in time for a ritual meal at dawn of the third day, where the name of El at his threshing floor would revivify or resurrect the Rephaim. The threshing floor of El, or the tabernacle of El, very similar terms to what's applied to the Temple Mount.
Well, it's a big topic to get into to try to explain everything. But basically, a threshing floor is a portal to the other realm.
And for some reason, this site of ancient Sodom, and Dr. Philip Sylvia, who's the scientific director for the dig at Tal el-Hammam, is not the first one to make this connection. The respected Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen wrote about this decades ago, speculating that was the location. But the Canaanites who saw Joseph and the family mourning there for 7 days before they continued around the Dead Sea and traveled back southwest to Hebron, they named it Abel Mizraim, which either means meadow of the Egyptians or mourning, mourning, mourning of the Egyptians.
I would say it's probably mourning because they were wailing.
Yes.
They had loved Jacob as one of their princes.
The patriarch who established the tribes of Israel.
Yes, but why go there?
Exactly. Why go there? What was it about that location? And then a couple of centuries later, why did Moses and the Israelites camp there and begin worshiping this Baal Peor, this god of the entrance to the netherworld? Well, again, in Ezekiel chapter 39, he describes the ending of the war of Gog and Magog, and he makes, I think we can derive some clues here from the way he puts it. Ezekiel 39, verse 11, the end of the war of Gog and Magog. And we write in the book Giants, Gods, and Dragons about why we believe this is to be equated with the war that ends with Armageddon. On that day, I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea. It will block the travelers, for there Gog and all his multitude will be buried. It will be called the valley of Hamon Gog, which means the multitude of Gog. But the word in Hebrew translated travelers is avarim. And when Sharon was talking about the mountain of the travelers and the ruins of the travelers, you find that in the book of Exodus, the books of Exodus and Deuteronomy. One of the stations of the Exodus called Iye, I-Y-E, Ha'avarim, A-B-A-R-I-M. And in Deuteronomy, Moses is told to climb this mountain of Avarim, mountain of travelers. That term travelers is used specifically of the Rephaim in that Amorite text about the Rephaim summoning them to the threshing floor of El to be resurrected.
Exactly, that threshing floor again. Well, in the Septuagint, it puts it this way. This is verse 11 of Ezekiel 39. And it shall come to pass that in that day,
the day of the Lord, yes,
I will give to Gog a place of renown, a tomb in Israel, the burial place of them that approach the sea. And they shall build round about the outlet of the valley, and there they shall bury Gog and all his multitude. And the place shall then be called the burial place of Gog. Not the ruins of the travelers,
right?
Not just the Avarim, but Gog himself is now dead.
Yes, Gog and all his multitude will be buried. Gog is to be equated with the Antichrist.
This is a spirit entity.
Right. Gog in the Jewish mind, Jewish religious scholars understood Gog to be the great end times enemy of God and Israel. And so to Christians that, well, that's the Antichrist. Well, yes, exactly. That is the Antichrist. And when we read further down, and we'll do a deeper study in Ezekiel 38 and 39 to explain in more detail why we equate this with a war that ends at Armageddon. So if we're correct in interpreting the way Ezekiel is using this phrase, then it would appear that the Antichrist's army at Armageddon includes an army of demons, the spirits of these Nephilim destroyed in Noah's flood.
Well, yes, and I think you may be right. What I find interesting, and again, we're not going to get through this whole topic this week. What I find interesting about what you were discussing about the Jewish eschatological idea of Gog, that it is the Antichrist. Well, a lot of the Jews are expecting that to be the next thing.
Yes.
Gog will arrive next. So if a war happens and they say, well, that's Gog, so he's taken out of the way, now our Messiah comes in.
And that was something I wrote in the book Bad Moon Rising, which ostensibly deals mainly with Islam, but I think that Islam has been set up as a stalking horse, as a false flag, if you will, to lure our Jewish brothers and sisters into welcoming the Antichrist with open arms.
I hate to see that. I really, really hate to see that. And so we need to preach and pray for the people of Israel right now and our friends at Parada's doing that very thing.
Yes.
But if this does happen, and they do believe that the war of Gog and Magog has been accomplished, and the Messiah comes in and takes over, they are fooled, which means that if they are correct, the fallen realm is going to take advantage of that. And we will see a war that even some Christians may say, well, that's it. That's Gog and Magog, because we've all been looking for that. Now, we don't know for certain that that's the way to interpret that, but it's a way that makes it seems logical to me.
Well, yeah, and the big clue, and again, there's more to it than this, but the big clue for us is in Ezekiel 39, verse 7, where God says, my holy name I will make known in the midst of my people Israel, and I will not let my name be profaned anymore. And the nations shall know that I am Yahweh, the Holy One in Israel.
In Israel,
Right.
exactly, because it's always of.
Yes, this is the only place in the Bible that the phrase is rendered the Holy One in Israel rather than the Holy One of Israel, which means at this point in the war of Gog and Magog, when the war is over, God is on the battlefield himself. And it would not make sense for the end times to continue if God has personally intervened and arrived on the battlefield to destroy the Antichrist and his army. again, there's more to it than this, but that's a quick sum up as to why we equate this with that. But you're right. Rabbis who have not historically been calling for, or been saying, make Aliyah, get to Israel now because the Messiah's arrival is imminent. They've been pointing to the war in Syria since 2011 as the war of Gog and Magog.
And if the day comes that is somehow resolved or won or whatever,
Yes.
then whoever comes into Jerusalem and takes over the throne, if you want to put it that way, that's going to be a very dangerous point. I don't think we're going to be here at that time, but I could be wrong.
No, I agree with you. This would be somebody who would appear to be a political or military savior for Israel, or perhaps both, may well be welcomed as Messiah. And the enemy, the fallen realm, would certainly use someone like that to deceive Jews into welcoming this person. But we are told that there will be a remnant that will see through this. They will understand what's happened. And
they're going to preach like 144,000 Pauls.
Exactly. So in Genesis 14, the Lord used these pagan kings from Mesopotamia to clean out the Rephaim tribes east of the Jordan River, so that all Moses and the Israelites had to do was wipe out Og of Bashan. And then later, when the Lord appeared to Abraham and Sarah and delivered the promise of the son of the promise, Isaac, that was connected to then the destruction of Sodom, which still lured the Israelites away when Moses returned and the Israelites fell into the worship of the god who apparently was worshipped there, Baal Peor. Now, that's somewhat speculative on our part. We don't know that for sure, but the concentration of dolmens at the base of that city seems to suggest that a cult of the dead was centered right there.
I so agree with you, and I really believe that city, that it was like a Babel take two. We're not going to build a big building because that didn't work. But we are going to find a way to summon this ancient deity, the king of old, from the underworld. And I believe that their practices that often are used as the reason that Sodom was taken out, but I don't think that Sodom and Gomorrah and the other three cities were taken out because only of those practices. I think that those sexual practices had to do with the rites that had to occur to bring this entity back.
Exactly. And these were clearly a snare that drew the Israelites in for many generations thereafter, because as we found when we researched the book Veneration, that Isaiah, writing 700 years after Moses and the Israelites just before they crossed the Jordan River, Isaiah was still condemning the Israelites for holding secret rituals amongst the tombs and eating tainted broth and forbidden meat.
These were things you do to summon the spirits to commune with them.
Yeah, I mean, when Jesus cast the demons out of the Gerasene demoniac, it's not a coincidence that he was there amongst a herd of pigs and living amongst the tombs.
Yeah.
Pork was raised to offer sacrifices to the dead in the ancient Near East.
That's a big topic that we're going to have to save for next week, so we'll continue this talk when we come back next week.
Yes, it's all connected from Genesis to Revelation, and that's why we do this program, and we thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.
Unraveling Revelation is part of Skywatch TV, a viewer-supported ministry. To learn more about Skywatch TV and the work of our sister ministry, Whispering Ponies Ranch, please visit our website, skywatchtv.com.